Hey everybody, Sam Buka here. It's 2025. I figure let's get philosophical. So there's going to be some mainstream topics I'm going to be covering on this channel. There's going to be some controversial stuff, but it's all in the interest of just thinking critically through all of this just random noise going on in the world and trying to get that signal, get that everything processed, synthesized, and just figure out what our next best moves are and just how to think about things. So here's my 2 cents on a interesting topic. Today we're going to talk about the rich versus the poor and the idea of the dynamics of the zero sum game of wealth. So kind of titling this video here, Rich versus Poor, the zero sum dynamics of wealth. Wealth is great, capitalism is great. I love it, but I just want to kind of go through some things here, okay? There's a paradox out there when you listen to influencers, all right? And what that is the influencers are really pushing people to be like them, right? They want everyone to be rich. They want everyone to be ripped. They want everyone to have what they have and be at the top and be better than average, right? The only problem is they're not calling out one key paradoxical element of their argument or their thought leadership. I know that word or that phrase might be obnoxious in 2025, but I think when it comes to their thought leadership, the one thing they don't call out is that being rich or being at that elevated status requires that others are not at that elevated status. In a population where you have a standard distribution, being rich requires that others are poor. Or that's so to say that there's a contrast there. Because if everybody was as above average as you, the new average would be you. And everybody would be the same, which means that there's more demand, which is going to squeeze supply higher. There's going to be no differentiation or uniqueness and no contrast. Okay. So even if we substitute the word rich and poor, don't even worry about the wealth things. We could throw that in the garbage. Just if we're thinking about ranking and status, when you up level a system, your persistence ranking is static, which is okay. So if we make an entire society as a whole block step up and the poorest are richer than the previous richest were in the previous cycle, that means that the poorest folks in society, the lowest status folks, have a better quality of life than the highest status or highest quality of life havers from the previous measurement cycle. It doesn't mean that your position changes in relation and proportion to others in that distribution. So what am I rambling on about here in freaking 2025? All I'm saying is when it comes to influencers, they need to call out, I think, disclaim that not they really don't want everyone to be like them. Because if everybody was like them, then they wouldn't be them. You see what I'm saying? You feel me? So I know it's uncomfortable, but it's true. Wealth or status, outside status thrives on scarcity, and scarcity thrives on inequality. No, we don't even have to think about money in this situation. We're just thinking about status. Like think about a baller that's in the NBA versus the rest who can't ball. You need that contrast. So let's dive into why this matters. Okay. A couple things I'm going to cover today. The uncomfortable truth: the higher status need the lower status. The rich need the poor. Royalty needs peasants. Even if the peasants are doing better than the previous royalty were, like even if the peasants are balling, royalty needs to be balling even more than they are. Okay. And then we'll talk about how scarcity and value create a system that maintains that contrast gap that is essential for influencers to stand out. And it's okay. I think that influencers should promote a higher quality of life and how to better yourself. But they literally are banking on the fact that the system can only thrive for that influencer to be a standout influencer versus the average rest. It can only survive if it banks on the fact that not everyone is going to be able to achieve that. And maybe that's already inherently understood by everybody. Who knows? So I'm also wanting to put in here as an argument why we should focus on raising the floor and not eliminating the gap entirely. All right. So this is just philosophy. This is philosophy. This is a philosopher or whatever the hell we want to call it. I got to figure out what my identity really is in these videos, but I just wanted to kind of talk through this. Okay. So let's talk about the scarcity or the role of scarcity in wealth. Scarcity drives value. Wealth is only meaningful when compared to scarcity. Without scarcity, diamonds are just rocks, and luxury becomes mundane. Because if it's not unique and if everybody has it, nobody wants it. Everybody wants it because no one can achieve it. Think about a casino. A casino is only exciting because most of the time you're losing. So when you do win, it feels unique. It feels rare. If you win all the time in a casino, you're not going to that casino, or it won't even be able to exist because there'll be no thrill. There'll be no special moment. You see what I'm saying? So the rich need the poor, right? The high status needs the lowest status. From royalty needing peasants to modern influencers needing followers, wealth depends and status depends on distance. All right. The distances equate to the abundance. All right. That's point number one here is just how scarcity intersects with the status system. All right. So why is the gap necessary? The necessary gap is built upon the fact that without the gap, value diminishes. Scarcity creates exclusivity, and this is what drives desire. Example: high-end brands, exclusive memberships, and limited opportunities are the most attractive options, services, and products out there. Inflation and shifting the floor. So let's talk about how this impacts inflation and how the floor is ideally what we want to move and matric or what's the word I'm looking for here? Elevate. Okay. So when the poor rises, aka wages increase, people spend more, and demand grows, inflation follows. So there's one argument to be made that the when the ceiling moves up, the floor moves up, but also everything gets more expensive. So inflation can be a signal in a lot of ways. It could be argued, it could be a symptom or a signal from a very healthy economy. Um, I know that's gonna you're gonna want to slap me across the face for saying that. I'm just saying it's a hypothetical statement here. It's just a philosophical statement here. The result is, when it comes to inflation and the shifting floor, the result is that a perpetual system where the gap remains, um, is can be beneficial, but society can still benefit when the floor rises. So when the entire society step functions up, the inequality gap still exists, but the lowest on the totem pole still have a better quality of life than they did before. Okay. So let's talk about the psychological truth about wealth. All right. The psychology of scarcity is deeply baked into this. People are wired to making comparisons. People want to compare and contrast. Wealth only feels significant in the relation to someone else's lack of that wealth. In a room full of billionaires, a millionaire feels poor, right? So, but if everyone's a billionaire, then a billionaire doesn't really, it's like, who cares? It doesn't, it's not really special. So this is another relation to the influencers, pushing everyone and gaslighting everyone to, be like them. They really are, if everybody follows suit and is successful in achieving that, then that influencer is pretty much dead in the water. They're no longer an influencer. They're a watered down, diluted non-influencer at that point. So it's just like one of those things where they say, if a rich person talks shit to a poor person, it's the stupidest thing you could do. A rich person should never talk shit to a poor person. A rich person should always help a poor person, but they need that poor person to even be rich. That's the point. It's hypocritical when a rich person looks down on a poor person because that rich person wouldn't even be rich without that contrast. That's what's so hypocritically annoying and frustrating for me. And I know I'm getting heated over here, but I'll just get back into it. Um, when we talk about the ceiling, society focuses and often, looks to achieve reaching that ceiling, but we really got to look at the raising floor, right? The minimum viable sustenance floor. Because if somebody manufactures a Bugatti, if somebody manufactures a mansion, there's no entitlement or claim to that. So if somebody has something, there's no they built it or they achieved it. There's no law that says by nature, by birthright, you have access to a mansion or a Bugatti or something like that. You wouldn't even want that Bugatti if it was accessible to everybody. Because it isn't accessible, because it is rare, because it's something that you don't have is why you have it. If everybody had the Bugatti, you wouldn't want it. So there are going to be a lot of things in life that you don't have, and that's normal, and that should be the case. You're not entitled to everything, and in fact, you're entitled to nothing. All right, other than your just base sustenance and being left alone. All right, all these artificial synthesized manufactured things, products, and services, you have no claim to them. But what you do have claim to when a society step functions up is a general like minimum viable floor of substance. Okay, so the like when it comes to what we can do here, what's the point of all this, is we just gotta, I just want to just acknowledge the system, right? I just want to acknowledge that we all understand that scarcity and value always exist. Like they're intertwined, they're symbiotic. But we can make the gap less harmful. All right. So that the floor is more in service of a quality of life. Universal access to education, healthcare, other opportunities kind of lift the floor for all, as long as it's not overregulated. I mean, I'm not even gonna get into all that, but you can still be a baller. I still want to live in a society where there's ballers that are better than everybody else because that gives us something to achieve to. It moves the envelope, it step functions up the society. I mean, if we're all just the same, that's just communism, and I hate communism. I like capitalism. I like capitalism of getting better and achieving and just elevating. So raising the floor is one thing that I just want to focus on here and just calling out. But I still want to maintain that there should be a contrast. There should be higher achievers and lower achievers. That's totally fine. We wouldn't even want more in life if there wasn't that scarcity in the ability for everyone to have everything. If everybody has everything, nobody has anything. So why this all matters, right? I just want to flip the narrative here. It's not about erasing the gap in between, those who have everything and those who are trying to achieve. It just makes it, I just want to make it possible for everyone to get in the game and try and through their own efforts and achievements, have a higher quality of life. So just it's more about enablement. Wealth isn't about exploitation. It coexists with equity and equality. Why do I say that? Well, because if somebody wants to do something more, they don't owe you anything. And they don't owe you them not doing more just to make you feel good about not doing more. They're net increasing the footprint in the pie here. You know what I mean? Okay. So challenge the system with action, right? So invest in education, I think, is one big thing, technology, and just raising the baseline for everybody. But the core thing here is I want influencers to call out that royalty needs peasants, but we need to kind of redefine what that peasant means in modern society. There's always going to be the standard distribution of the average, but the influencers need the average. Otherwise, they wouldn't be contrasted to the average and seen as influencers. So, in recap here, I just think that the rich thrive on the poor, right? Or that contrast, and it's all relative in positioning and persistent in ranking. And scarcity drives value, and the gap will always exist for the most part. I don't know, maybe the robots come and that's going to change things. But raising the floor benefits everyone. I think the main point here is you influencers out there and you rich people, don't make fun of poor people. Don't make fun of the average. Give them ways to be better. But in all honesty, as an influencer, you need the average.